Hello again. I want to talk this morning about one of the most awful and patronising myths about Africa because it's something which spills over into everyday life in Britain and America as well. Although few people ever put the matter into words or follow their ideas to a logical conclusion, an awful lot of white people in Europe and America hold views about pre-colonial Africa which owe a good deal to the 18th century concept of the noble savage, as it was called. And this attitude towards Africa and towards the indigenous inhabitants of places also like Australia and North America tends to spill over into how white liberals feel about black people living in their own countries. There was in the 17th and 18th centuries a tendency to romanticize those from cultures other than that of Europe. This was done with Native Americans and Africans in particular. The idea was that people who lived in unsophisticated and primitive societies were in some vague sense more natural, and that they were free of the vices which were thought to be a product of civilization at that time. Greed and envy, for instance, were considered to be caused by modern life, and it was thought that in an African or a Native American village, everybody would share what they had and nobody would be rich or poor. Such people were believed by some to be more in tune with the natural world and more virtuous than those who lived in great cities and were constantly trying to exploit others and become wealthy. This led to the idea of the so-called noble savage, untainted by all the bad aspects of modern civilization. Alexander Pope wrote a poem in the early 18th century which summed up this distorted view about the difference between savages, so-called, and those who lived in civilized lands. Lo, the poor Indian, whose untutored mind sees God in clouds or hears him in the wind, his soul proud science never taught to stray far as the solar walk or Milky Way. Yet simple nature to his hope has given, behind the cloud-topped hill, a humbler heaven, some safer world in depth of woods embraced, some happier island in the watery waste, where slaves once more their native land behold. No fiends torment, no Christians thirst for gold. To be content his natural desire, he asks no angel's wing, no seraph's fire, but thinks, admitted to that equal sky, his faithful dog shall bear him company. It is a pleasing vision of a simple man who is more in touch with nature and God than white Europeans. He has no thirst for gold and is happy simply to be. This mentality amongst white people is still going strong today. Many people in the West believe that the native inhabitants of both North and South America lived peaceful lives attuned with the natural world, and that they respected the land in the style of a modern climate change activist. Hand in hand with such ideas goes the traditional view of the noble savage before the coming of Europeans to Africa or the Americas or Australasia. Life was simpler and free of many of the less desirable character traits which we see in industrialized countries. These were people free of the mad obsession with acquiring consumer goods or piling up money in banks. Their lives were uncomplicated and gentler than those of us involved in the modern world, and we could learn from examining such people and perhaps adopting their philosophical outlook on life, if only we too could attain such a state of being. Captivated as we are by the thought of the pastoral and thoroughly natural life led by all those folks in Africa before the wicked Europeans came along and spoiled it all, we cannot quite bring ourselves to believe that some black Africans were every bit as greedy and cruel as any white person. In this way, a strange belief has arisen that anything wrong in Africa today must have been caused by white people, and cannot be something intrinsic in the continent. The latest thing in this line is that homophobia in Africa and the Caribbean was imported by white people and is a legacy of colonialism. It seems that if only white people had never set foot in Africa, it would be an LGBTQ plus paradise. I give a link to an article about this in the description to this video, explaining how there was no homophobia in Africa before white people arrived there. This idea of the noble savage is especially popular with middle-class white liberals for a very simple reason, which is that they seldom or never actually come into contact with black people, other than as people they encounter doing menial jobs, such as, say, security guards. They do not socialise as a rule with black people. This is the case in Britain and a lot of America. They don't socialise with them as in going for dinner at their homes or stuff like that. Whenever I've asked a middle-class Guardian reader in this country about this, I have received dirty looks. But when they finally answer, it is to the effect that they have never actually been in the home of an ordinary working-class black family. I find this almost incredible, but there it is. This lack of actual contact with real living and breathing black people enables them to romanticise black people, both in this country and also in Africa, and persuade themselves that black people are in some way more natural than they are, as well as being ethically and morally better. This ghastly attitude is all part and parcel of the noble savage concept about which I've been speaking. In a sense, black people are not real for middle-class white liberals, but they are rather an abstract notion.